We are having three guests from the United States who are going to speak us about the dangers of the transatlantic trade and partnership. So, Melinda, you are from Public Citizen. What is the main opinion of Public Citizen about TTIP?
Well, we have been very concerned about TTIP from the beginning, first because of the process of the negotiations. These negotiations have been taking place in secrecy. We're very disappointed in the Obama administration in the United States who has been conducting these negotiations behind closed doors. There are 500 corporate advisors in the United States, 9 out of 10 of whom represent the biggest big business in the United States that are influencing the outcome. And so we're concerned about the content that includes many of the same concerns we've heard here in Europe. We're very concerned about what the impact could be on our democracy. We're concerned about investor-state dispute settlement, or ISDS, which would empower corporations to attack our public health and environmental safeguards outside our court systems. We're very concerned about impacts on food safety, on our financial regulation, on data privacy, a whole host of issues that we think needs to be, the whole project would need to be rethought in order to put people at the center of the agenda, as opposed to just large business at the center of the agenda.
Okay, in Europe and especially in Hungary, politicians try to sell TTIP as because we need it in order to have economic growth and more jobs. So what is your opinion and what is your experience since now you have NAFTA more than 20 years in place?
Well, what we've learned from our experience is that to be very skeptical about any of these projections on economic growth or jobs. Before NAFTA, when NAFTA was being sold to the U.S. public, we were told that it would create hundreds of thousands of jobs, that it would increase the standard of living in the U.S. and Mexico and Canada. And unfortunately, after 20 years of this model, that has unfortunately encouraged corporations to offshore jobs as opposed to bring jobs to the United States. There were 1 million jobs in the United States lost in the first 10 years. And these were good manufacturing jobs. And what many of the people, 1 in 4 people in the United States who worked in the manufacturing sector lost their jobs during that period. The jobs that replaced them in many cases were much lower paying. It's undermined the ability of unions to collectively bargain in the interest of workers, and that's led to an overall depression of wages in the United States. And so, what we've seen from the projections of TTIP, we're very actually, what is being projected are actually very, very modest growth projections, only 0.5% by 2027 for the EU, 0.2% growth in the United States. These are basically rounding errors in in large economies like ours. And from our experience, we actually don't see these things actually borne out. So given the very unlikely results of TTIP in terms of growth and jobs and the enormous risks it plays, that makes us very worried.
Okay, and then for Hungary, one of the key issues is whether TTIP could threaten the GMO-free status of the country. And we have also heard some rumors about TTIP can force feed us with chlorinated chicken or hormone-treated cows. So what do you think about these issues? Or what is your opinion about the dangers regarding chemicals?
Well, what we do know, and again, these negotiations are happening in secret. We've seen some of what the European Union has put on paper, but the United States has not published any of its proposals. We do know what U.S. agribusiness and what U.S. corporations want out of TTIP. They have been very open. They have made public testimony that they specifically want TTIP to be able to undermine annoying regulations in the European Union, such as regulations on GMOs, such as different chemicals in beef and in poultry. Whether in the end those specific issues come to bear in this negotiation. The concern is that even if due to public uprising and outrage, they do not change those regulations in TTIP, what they plan to have a regulatory cooperation ongoing in the future. And so outside the public eye later would be an opportunity for chemical corporations or large agribusiness to have strong influence over regulations in the future. So I think European citizens are right to be concerned about what the impacts could be over the long term on food safety and over your democratic ability to decide what you want to accept in the food that you eat.
As I am aware, you are mainly focusing now on the battle against fast track in the U.S. So, what is the current situation? As at least, even for me, it's really hard to understand what is the situation in the Senate and the Congress. There is a complicated package. So, what is now the situation in the U.S.?
Well, unfortunately, we have just finished a very bloody battle in the United States around the Fast Track Trade Authority, which was Congress delegating its authority to the president to negotiate these agreements for the next 6 years. It would include the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the TTIP, and just bring those agreements back for just an up or down vote in the U.S. Congress without any, with a very small amount of debate and no amendments. There was a very massive campaign that bridged across sectors from consumers to labor to environment to faith groups to internet freedom groups to seniors to LGBT groups. It was a broad coalition fighting this, and because of that, almost all of the Democratic Party in the U.S. House of Representatives were opposed to their own President Obama, and giving this authority. And so what ended up in the end was that while it was blocked 2 different occasions, unfortunately, the White House, with the corporate lobby and the Republican leadership, managed to do some legislative maneuvering in a very underhanded way to be able to get a very tiny majority to pass fast track. So unfortunately, they were able to, in the end, after a long series of delays, and the details are quite astonishing for those of us who watch or who are close observers of Washington, and so it was quite disappointing to see the president act in this way, and the leadership of the Congress to do so. But the result of the campaign was that that we were talking about many of the issues that are animating the debate in the European Union, such as ISDS. The U.S. public has a much better sense of that around food safety issues, around democracy issues, and so that energy is now going to need to be translated into a campaign to first stop the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, which is being negotiated first in the United States, and then also the TTIP.
So now you are taking part of a European tour where various citizens group, U.S. citizens group and labor unions present their opinion and to show to the European public that there is also an opposition to TTIP in the U.S. And what is your message to European citizens or civil society organizations regarding TTIP?
Well, our main message is that it is very important for us to work together transatlantically. We are very much supportive. We love Europe. We very much support trade and cooperation with Europe. What is important is what the model of this is, right? And what we want to be able to do is to reject a model that puts corporations at the center and in the decision making, to put corporations in the place where they have undue influence and are making decisions, and we can actually bring the publics together to be able to ensure that we're protecting the public. And so, we on our side of the Atlantic will continue to mobilize and build campaigns. We want to be able to share information with citizens and trade unions and the large coalitions that are happening on this side of the Atlantic to oppose this corporate-led agenda, and so that we can really start to envision a different model for integration and cooperation between the United States and Europe.